Hi, I'm Scott Treppel, and I want to talk to you today about a sale we have coming up that is special. It's Wade Saadi's collection of cancellations, which he calls Struck on Stamps. He exhibited the collection in a lot of stamp shows. It was always very, very popular. Wade collected from the 1980s until very recently and assembled an incredible collection of a really fascinating area, and I think you'll enjoy what I have to show you today. Cancellations and postmarks served a lot of different purposes. We call cancellations on stamps killer cancellations because they killed the stamp. They made it invalid for second use. Some cancellations were very perfunctory, grids, targets, uninteresting shapes. Postmasters also used their date stamp to cancel the postage stamp, and at a certain point they weren't supposed to do that. So the result was they carved cancellations or used more interesting markings to serve the same purpose. Wade calls his collection Struck on Stamps because he only collected postage stamps which had the markings on them. He had off-cover stamps, stamps used on the original covers, and he always picked great examples of these cancellations. The strikes are nice and clear. They're some of the rarest ones there. And I'm going to take you on a little tour through the collection that we'll be selling on September 24th. We'll start with the simplest cancellations. They were words, but sometimes those words weren't so simple. A really interesting marking is the next Wednesday postmark, and I can't tell you what post office it comes from. The circle just says next Wednesday. After studying this marking for years, the experts are still confounded by what this next Wednesday means. Was it a railroad schedule? Was it a steamer departure? We haven't really figured it out. I gave it my best try, and I think it might be a postmark used at a post office in Maine, which has something to do with the temperance movement. This is in the 1850s, and there was a strong movement to ban alcohol. And next Wednesday might have referred to a vote to pass certain legislation for the temperance movement. It's an educated guess. I don't know if we'll ever get the true answer. Another cancel in Wade's collection, which is so simple but very, very rare, it's a word. It just says used. It meant the stamp was used. And there are very few cancels that say used. I think this is one of the more interesting covers in the collection from the 1850s. Now, some markings were very clear in their meaning. Old stamps not recognized was used in a few post offices. In Philadelphia, they started using it in August of 1861 to indicate that the old issue of stamps, the 1857s we call them, were declared invalid by the post office. Instead of the 1857 issue, you were supposed to use the 1861 issue. And at a certain point, they demonetized the 1857 issue. And to show that postage hadn't been paid, even though you put a stamp on it, they created this marking old stamps not recognized. Among the different categories of cancellations that Wade collected, we have the colored cancellations. And red, blue are the more common colors. Of course, black is the most common. But you also get green and other shades. And this cover that I'm showing you right now is a remarkable cover. It was actually postmarked at 3 different post offices, once in Connecticut, a second time in Buffalo, and a third time in Avon, New York. And they used red, green, and blue ink. So on one cover, you've got all 3 of those colors, red, green, and blue. The rarest of all colors is yellow. And Wade owns what is considered to be the greatest of the few known yellow cancel covers there are. It comes from Hebron, New Hampshire. It has a 3-cent 1851 on it, and it is a remarkable color yellow. It's hard to tell in an image like this, but the ink is true yellow. It's not adulterated, oily ink or anything like that. It is a real vivid yellow ink. And you could see why it was so rare. It didn't really do an effective job of canceling the stamp. I imagine that if somebody took the stamp off and reused it again, it would be hard to tell that it had been canceled. The simplest form of fancy cancellations, which is what we call them, are shapes, simple shapes like stars. And here we have a cover from Downeyville, California, with the outline star cancellation struck 4 times. This is probably the greatest example of this cancellation. There are others, but this one with the 4 strikes of the outline star is considered to be the best. Some shapes were created for a practical purpose. The postmaster used this large rectangular uh, box with wavy lines in it. We call it the spider cancel. I'm not sure why, but it's a very unusual uh, shape cancellation, and it served a purpose. Most of the mail at the time coming from California had 6 cents postage on it, and there was no single 6-cent stamp. So people used a pair of 3-cent stamps. So to cancel a 3-cent pair with 1 strike in one operation, Postmaster created this large rectangular cancellation. Next, we'll get into the hand-carved cancellations. These are my favorites. You get these amazing designs that were created by postmasters by whittling into wood or cork. We'll start off looking at a fraternal design. It's a Masonic image. You have the seeing eye, 3 links, and arrows. This is one of the more famous Masonic cancellations, and although it's not super rare, it is very rare struck this well. You can see all the details of the design. Now, the Civil War gave postmasters a lot of reasons to carve different designs. We'll start by looking at the flag facing left and the word Union, which was used at Healdsburg, California. In New York City, the postmaster, or really the clerk at a post office, carved the soldier's head cancellation. And this was actually used after the war in 1866. A terrific design is an image of Uncle Sam thumbing his nose. It was struck in blue at the post office up in Brattleboro, Vermont. This was a Reconstruction era cancel, and I think it says it all, the North thumbing its nose at the South. In 1865, after Lincoln's assassination, the post office in Albany, New York, created a cancellation to honor his memory. We call it a mourning cancellation. And it showed Lincoln's name with stars surrounding it and a circular background. One of the craziest designs is Benedict Arnold's leg. It was used in Brattleboro, Vermont, and it shows his leg in an elaborate frame. And he lost that leg in the war, and there's actually a monument honoring his leg up in somewhere in New England. Now, this is the zebra cancellation, and it was used in New York City, and we always used to call it the horse's head cancel. But some research by another collector named Nick Kirk revealed that the source of this cancel, the inspiration for this cancel, was a zebra at the zoo in New York City. So we renamed it the zebra head. The greatest carver of cancellations of all time, and it's beyond dispute, is John Hill of Waterbury, Connecticut. The Waterburys are collected almost as a whole separate category of fancy cancellations. John Hill carved hundreds of cancellations. We start by looking at the eagle and shield, which he carved after the war, actually, in 1866. Now, Postmaster Hill was inspired to carve many different kinds of cancels. This is a dog's head, and it's a very good strike of it. Sometimes the dog is kind of blurry and you can't tell that it's a dog. You can on this stamp, though. Another cancel by John Hill is the duck on water, and we are pretty sure it was inspired by a duck hunting trip in the fall of 1867. Here we have a politically motivated cancellation. It shows a tombstone, and you can see the skull and crossbones at the top, and the initials AJ, which stood for Andrew Johnson. And after the war, when Andrew Johnson opposed what he called the radical Republicans in their effort to establish the laws of Reconstruction, Andrew Johnson was impeached, and he was not convicted. But in 1868, Ulysses S. Grant was elected, and Grant was much more favorable towards the Reconstruction policies in the South. There's so many cancellations in this sale. I could spend another hour talking about them, hours talking about them. But you can see them online in the catalog for the sale on September 24th. The Wade Saadi collection, Struck on Stamps. And then that sale will be followed on Saturday, September 28th, by part two, which is a paperless catalog sale that has more of his cancellations in it. Altogether, this is a great opportunity to jump into an area which I think is just visually fascinating, something you can show anybody, whether they're a stamp collector or not, and they'll be intrigued by the different cancellations and designs.